Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video. And yes guys, that's right. You read the title, and you know exactly what it is that I am now about to review. This one documentary that's, yeah, it's definitely amazing. It's the documentary that, by that point, and even to this day, we definitely need. And yeah, this documentary being all about the one and only, the kindest, sweethearted guy we knew. For many years, we grew up with him, and even if we didn't grow up with him, and that goes for me too, because I was born the same year and around when his show came to an end. And I think that, yeah, for just a few years, I really didn't have any full knowledge of him. I mean, I don't know, because, like, it depends if, like, say, maybe my parents... Well, I had a DVD copy of one of his shows, of a few episodes. But, yeah, but overall, yes. I am now finally reviewing the amazing, and I'd say probably definitive documentary all about Fred Rogers himself. Yes, from 2018, this is Won't You Be My Neighbor? Of course, have to say it like that, because there's a question mark in the title of the documentary. So, yes, the documentary all about Fred Rogers, Won't You Be My Neighbor? Fantastic. It's a fantastic documentary, all of the above. And shout out to my friends over at So You Want to Be an Imagineer. Are you happy/satisfied? I now watched it. But anyways, so yeah. Yeah, I don't know, because here's the thing. I don't know what took me so long to get around to this documentary. It's nothing intentional, just naturally just never got a chance to get around to it until now. And here I am now, doing my review, of course. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm glad to finally have sat down and watched this documentary all the way through, and, of course, for me, did not disappoint. How could it not? Everything that we learn about Fred Rogers, and to anybody whom, didn't know that much details and such about Fred Rogers, that goes for me, and I'm sure you as well, any of you. But it's thanks to this documentary, because, yeah, there were a good chunk of things that I didn't know that much of about Fred Rogers, because, yeah, well, obviously, there are a few prominent parts in this documentary that I was well aware of. Even when the trailers came out, it showed and explained about some of the things that Fred went through, and good old Fred, he set things straight and responding to some things that were happening in reality. And, not to mention, because, yeah, with the things that I didn't know about, and I'm sure you didn't, that the fact that he tried to go for another TV show where he would center on adults, and, some of his early TV work that he did, and where he was doing a puppet and so on, and he was working alongside with his wife, yeah. And knowing about his background and what he was doing at a young age, and even say Mr. McFeely referring to him at times as Fat Fred, for a specific reason, of course, yeah. But yeah. But yeah, just everything that this documentary has to offer is so heartwarming, so touching. Those that personally knew Fred himself, that worked alongside with him. And yeah, just definitely this documentary hits you right there. How could it not? And, because not a lot of people, of course, how could you not have one criticism to say over Fred? Well, who am I kidding? Because, yeah, even the documentary establishes that, yeah, I'm sure that even to this day, there are those that nitpick and criticize Fred Rogers, but it's just wrong. It really is. But, yeah, just like with what this documentary has to offer from beginning to end, it's amazing. The subjects that are talked about, knowing more about Fred's life and how he touched everybody. And, Fred, he went through some personal stuff and, the darkness that was going through the world and the tough times and such. Just overall, because this documentary is well worth a watch, without a doubt. You can't miss out on this. And, here's another thing, because I do remember, when this documentary came out, and just 1 year after the documentary came out, getting another piece of material that has to do with Mr. Rogers, and that of course being the biopic A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Yep, with Tom Hanks, so I remember that most prominently. I should have probably checked out this documentary before seeing the biopic, but I don't think it matters, so, But definitely, I should have gotten to this as soon as possible, but of course I have now, so yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So, with the first things I've had to say about the documentary itself, Won't You Be My Neighbor? Now, as always, for me, read the description / the story. An exploration of the life, lessons, and legacy of iconic children's television host Fred Rogers, of course. Okay, so, now with reading the description / the story done and out of the way, let us now dive in / break down the documentary itself. Yeah. Well, yeah, because, of course, talk about the key moments and all that and everything else. But, but, of course, have to start with talking about, say, his origins and such. Because, yeah, at a young age, he was fascinated with TV. And he even at one point told his parents that instead of, say, going to, college and so on, he was going to, be in the TV industry. And his parents were like, but you just now know what this is and all that. But, no. I mean, obviously it didn't take him too long to be fascinated and to know what television was like. And so, having started his business and career in television work and playing piano and for shows, and at that time, nobody wanted to do children's television program and all that, But Fred took it upon himself to do so, and even when, his wife was involved too. And, actually, yeah, because, my bad, because not her, it was Josie Carey that was involved. Yeah, that's right, my bad. I don't know, it was just the way the documentary was talking. I was like, are they talking about his wife? They're like, no. But, yeah, and not to mention that, in one of the shows, because, before Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Daniel Tiger was technically already born. Fred was already playing Daniel Tiger, playing this tiger puppet, already giving its name and personality. And also, this documentary, very cleverly, has some animations where we basically see a tiger version of Fred Rogers, the struggles that he goes through, say, when he was quarantined in his bedroom, he was sick, he lifted up his knees, that were under the bed sheets, and as if they were mountains, and he would take figurines and have them talk and go on adventures and so on. And also, when expressing anger, well, he would do that, say, on the piano. And we all know that song, because with anger and all that, do you pound some clay and you know which song I'm talking about. Yeah. Which, we should all keep that in mind the best we can, because, because, we've all been there, how we express our anger, but, for anybody, we should definitely listen to what Fred Rogers and everybody on the show taught us about expressing anger and how to do so. Yeah. But yeah, and also because and to go ahead and mention some of those that appear in this documentary. It's a shame that what's her face, Lady Amberlin, was not a part of this documentary. I'm guessing she just wasn't available, or I'm sure overall just stepping out of the spotlight. I'm guessing, but yeah. And also, another prominent person whom, was a big part of Fred's life, Jeff Erlanger. I think if I'm saying his last name right. We all know who he is. He doesn't appear in this documentary. But his parents do, so, yeah. Anyways, because Betty Amberlin, that's right. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, because they're, okay, so I genuinely forgot because, yeah, unfortunately, in 2007, Jeff sadly passed away. Yeah, so that's why he doesn't appear in this documentary. I'm sure that, hey, if he were still alive, he would have been a part of this documentary, yeah. But it's great to see that, when his parents step in, they speak on his behalf, of course, and, while I'm on that subject, because, yeah, we all know, of course, that one of the biggest moments to come from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was when Jeff Erlanger showed up, and because at a young age, 8 months old or something, because of what was going through his body, and at one point he had to have surgery, and even, before, say, the surgery, and actually, because right here, because, my parents asked me what it was I wanted to do before the surgery. And, his parents were basically expecting him to say that he wanted to go to an amusement park, but nope. I'm sure to their surprise, his answer was wanting to meet Mr. Rogers himself. And that's exactly what happened. Before surgery, and if there was a chance he would make it through surgery, he came on Mr. Rogers' show and explaining and giving Fred the details, and us, the TV viewers, about, why he's in a wheelchair, the surgery, and all that. And then Fred and Jeff singing "It's You I Like." Yeah, I remember that. I remember that most prominently in one of the DVD copies I had of a few episodes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And the bonus features, in one of the bonus features, it was basically, all about Fred Rogers, and there was a clip of them singing that song, so I do remember that, so, and of course, we can't forget to mention that, remember when, many years later, Fred and Jeff would reunite at an award show? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, that was great. But yeah, so, yeah, that was, of course, that had to be in the documentary somewhere, and of course, rightfully so it is. And Jeff's parents, Howard and Pam, yep, them being present. So, as I said, it's a shame that, okay, because, yeah, I genuinely forgot, because, yeah, Jeff had sadly passed away, but if he were still alive, there's no doubt that he would have been a part of this documentary. And with Betty Amberlin, yeah, because it's a shame that she wasn't a part of this documentary. But I'm guessing probably just being out of the public. Yeah, she has her, obviously, respect her privacy and all that, and what she wants. Yeah. Anyways, okay, so, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about, say, the moments and so on, because, okay, because, yeah, I had a feeling, of course, obviously, this being this documentary, the interaction with Coco the gorilla, yeah, because with the documentary featuring footage of Fred visiting Coco and the gorilla, whom, learned American Sign Language, and Coco, whom is usually shy, well, Coco embracing Fred and telling Fred she loved him and showcasing the power of his message, even to animals. And even, say, Coco was fascinated with Fred's sneakers, and, yeah, that being a big trademark, one of his big trademarks, with tying his shoes, or, say, zipping up his sweater, yeah. And also, speaking of sweaters, and while on that subject, because, yeah, there was one moment in the show where he was not able to zip up his sweater. He made a mistake. And yeah, because the subject of mistakes and all that, because yeah, that's a part of life. Making mistakes and such. Even if it's say, even if you in the case of Fred, he didn't zip up his sweater and such. Well, I mean, that's just a harmless, simple mistake. But big mistakes, and I've been there. We all been there. Because, yeah. And when we don't intentionally mean to do them, it's still a part of life. Facts. Yeah. But that's great, like, when they talk about that and such. Yeah, and as I already mentioned about Jeff, and yeah. And yeah, because Jeff, who was diagnosed with quadriplegia, if I'm mispronouncing it, but you know what it is, of course. But yeah, so... And also, the empathy of for children's experiences. And yeah, because the documentary shows Roger's deep empath for children, from a boy whose pet fish died to a child with a disability and who drew a picture for him. Yeah, because when talking about, like, say, death, divorce, and assassination, yeah, because those are biggies. And how Fred talked about those to the younger audience, and yeah, he did it like a boss, a trooper, you know? Yeah, because, I mean, with the subject of assassination and everything else like that, that took quite the guts to do that. And one of them, who is in this documentary, you know, says that was courageous, brave, to be talking about that. But Fred Rogers, well, he managed to succeed, you know? He did it, and it worked, of course. Because, you know, obviously, yeah, that's the thing, because kids, no matter what, every generation, they've got to know about these things. No matter what. Do the very best you can to explain that kind of stuff. And, you know, anybody who would think of Fred Rogers, maybe turn to him. Have your kids learn that from Fred, knowing that from his own words. And, oh yeah, because another biggie that was very interesting, I really had no full knowledge of, actually. The I love you code. Yeah, because the number 143, which stands for the number of letters in I love you. One is just, yeah, there's one letter in I, and in love, there's 4 letters, and in you, there's 3. But not just that. Fred also weighed 143 pounds, and even say when he went swimming and, like, making a jump or something, you know, like, yeah, hitting 143. So something about that number that really clicked with Fred. And on account, of course, that's the I love you code. And even to Fred, there are many ways to express love, and saying that I love you to that person, and so on. Very important and very true with what Fred said. And yeah, tackling difficult topics, yeah, difficulties and such, yeah, because, well, yeah, because addressing adult issues, because at one point in the documentary, it shows that Fred willingness to address the difficult topics, as I just said, yeah, because, as I mentioned, assassination, divorce, and death, because, well, you know, on account of, say, the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, and the Challenger space shuttle explosion, oh yeah, that being another biggie. And the way Fred talked about that, and with how they described it in this documentary, amazing, yeah, handled very well. You know, not to mention that with divorce, one of the people that's a part of this documentary, and whom was a big-time cast member of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Francois Scarborough Clemens. I'm butchering most of his name, but yeah, Officer Clemens, basically. He was Officer Clemens in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. A lot of interesting facts about Officer Clemens that I genuinely didn't know about. And I didn't watch that much of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I did when they re-aired and doing reruns of the show on PBS Kids during the good old days of PBS Kids. But I don't seem to recall having watched an episode of the show where Officer Clemens appears. Yeah, because about Officer Clemens, well, for one thing, because, like, yeah, the actor himself and Fred, they had a good friendship. And, you know, because he wasn't really sure, and, like, because he was a good singer and such, and, you know, when asked by Fred if he could be, you know, a cast member and play an officer, and, you know, the way they put at it at first, like, you know, finding officers scary, but no, not really. And because, like, Clemens, like, being a singer and all that, and his acting, because, yeah, his career, I should say, like, Fred would, for many years, poke fun at Clemens, you know, and with what Clemens specifically said. Also, there was another big moment where, Fred shared a small pool of water with Officer Clemens to soak their feet and such, clean their feet. Because, yeah, and as was in the trailers, and you guys know this, of course, back then, well, people were not too fond of African Americans swimming in public pools and trying to throw stuff like Clorox or whatever to get them out of the pool. And Fred, well, of course, knowing Fred, he did not like the sound of it. Yeah, but that's how it was back then. But, good thing times changed on that. But yeah, just with what Fred did, and as it shows in the documentary, because that there's really nothing wrong. Never has been anything wrong with, no matter what's, you know, colored skin we have. We could always be in a public pool and such. Yeah, we're all human beings. Yeah, so yeah, even Fred, of course, would have known that. Of course he does. But yeah. And also, another thing about Officer Clemens himself, the actor, because, the archive footage the more archive footage we get, we see some footage of him and his wife that he was married to for a couple of years. Unfortunately, they got divorced, and yeah, because, as would be brought up, you know, all about divorce, how Fred would talk about divorce, that, you know, people who are in love, they get married at some point, and sometimes they're not happy anymore, and they don't want to be married anymore. How Fred put at it is pure and simple. Makes sense. Yeah. It's sad, but hey, that's life, you know? Not everybody in the world is going to be happy together. It's unfortunate. Yeah. Especially because due to creative differences and different viewings or whatever, just, you know, you get my point. And yeah, not to mention that Clemens is gay. And yeah, because that's another biggie in this documentary, because Fred Rogers, he was never against gay people, LGBTQ, not at all. But at that time, and yeah, Fred was well aware that, and he warned Clemens not to come out to the public that he's gay, and this would affect his career and being on his show. Fred knew that, and just, you know, that warned Clemens that he can't do this. He can't do this, and yeah. And as much as Fred and everybody else behind the scenes were perfectly okay that, you know, he was a gay man, just, yeah, he just couldn't say it to the public. He could not let the whole public know that he was gay. Yeah, because back then, but as of now, it's all right, so, yeah. Tough times, even for Clemens, that's for sure. Yeah, and, you know, because, you know, it's baffling, because, you know, people saying that, you know, Fred was gay and he was against gay people and all that, that's ridiculous. It really is. Even when he was asked. And the reporter was prepared. Like, he made it very clear to Fred that, you know, please don't get upset and all that, but, you know, he just wanted to simply ask, you know, if he's straight and all that. Of course he was, you know? And, you know, because it's just, you know, ridiculous. But, you know, to those that have criticized Fred and thinking that he was against gays, no, he never was. Never was. We should all keep that in mind. And yeah, because, like, the backlash and criticism that Fred would receive at times is, you know, those were tough times, but, you know, that's just them. That's just the people. They're them. And if that's how they want to view, then, you know, more power to them. As my dad would most prominently say, more power to them. Just, yeah. Anyways, also, like, yeah, I already talked about that, because, yeah. Oh, yes, the Superman incident. Have to talk about this, too. Because at one point in the documentary, it includes a touching story about a child whom loved Superman. And every kid at that time, especially when the first Superman film came out in the late 70s, well, they pretended and played as Superman, wearing the capes and all that, like they had Halloween costumes and such. And them trying to fly, like they jump or something, because, yeah, a touching story about a child who was injured while trying to fly like Superman. And this incident prompted Fred to address the difference between fantasy and reality more directly in his show. Yeah, because there was an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, where one of the puppet characters attempted to fly, and X the Owl warning not to fly, and Lady Amberlin, just in the nick of time, catching that puppet character. And, yeah, because, big differences between fantasy and reality, because there's no way, of course, that a man can fly. It only exists in movies. And all these other things that just are make-believe. They're not real. They're fiction. Never happened. Not whatsoever. Just, yeah. Good on that. Also, to also mention this because, yeah. There was one point, I did not know about this. There was a time in the late 70s to the very early 80s where Fred Rogers stepped away from doing children's stuff, interacting and, reaching out to children. And he would turn his focus to adults with this show that, didn't, it only ran for a couple of years, again, from the late 70s to the early 80s, Old Friends, New Friends, where he focused on adults and trying to reach out to them and so on. And it worked for a little bit, but at some point it didn't go exactly as what Fred intended it for it to be. And that's when, because when turning his attention back to children, all that, And not to mention that there was a time when Fred, by the late 70s, he felt that, he ran his, the show ran its course, and, and even like one episode establishing that there are all these tapes of all these episodes and them being shown again. Yeah. Anyways, oh yes, and let's talk about Mr. McFeely for a moment, because, the actor who played Mr. McFeely, Speedy Delivery, because he started off being the prop handler and all that, doing props and such. And, it occurred to Fred, and he would turn to him, being aware that, he had done some acting, and asked him if he would play the delivery guy, which, of course, being Mr. McFeely himself. And, David Newell, that's his name, who plays Mr. McFeely. Because, moments when we come to him are great. And also, of course, I have to acknowledge, Fred's family. His wife, of course, as I technically brought up earlier, Joanne Rogers. Because, when we cut to her and the stuff that she talks about, and, she had been there and had seen what Fred had gone to, positive moments and downers. And, nice to see, we get an appearance of Fred's two sons, Jim Rogers and John Rogers. Speaking of John Rogers, I remember this, when A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood was announced and Tom Hanks was announced to portray Fred Rogers, according to John, his dad, Fred, had watched Forrest Gump many times. And, the detail that John goes into, and if anybody had seen that interview, because I think that, that's something, and, no doubt that Fred would have been impressed with the portrayal Tom brought to him. And because, again, Fred being an admirer of Tom's acting and the fact that he watched Forrest Gump many times. Yeah. Also, Fred's sister. I didn't have that full knowledge about him having other siblings. I'm just saying, but yeah. Elaine Crozer. I think I said that right. Yeah, apparently because he based Lady Elaine on, say, his sister and the aunt to Jim and John. And yeah, because the various characters, the puppet characters, and whom they've been inspired by, and so on. Yeah, and because, to talk more about the puppet characters, because, yeah, I mean, the details they go in, like, talking about, like, say, you know, Daniel Tiger and King Friday is very interesting. Yeah, because definitely Daniel Tiger is Fred's alter ego, without a doubt. And King Friday, because there's a part of Fred where, you know, just like, listen to this and all that, and like, you know, you listen to him, like, all that stuff. And if you know the character King Friday very well, and the connection that King Friday has with Fred. Interesting. Oh, and cannot forget to talk about this big topic. Because, yeah, the whole thing about Fred Rogers, and he was the man that was responsible for saving PBS. Yeah, because, yeah, with him confronting a senator, another pivotal moment in this documentary that shows Fred testifying before the Senate to defend funding for PBS, which was facing cuts because of what the president at the time, Nixon, was doing, which had to do with, say, PBS and all that. But Fred, he took it upon himself. His wife describing that she can see and can hear in his voice that, yeah, he was nervous and all that, but what he did on that day at court was a moment to remember in Fred's life, in his career, definitely. And by taking the lyrics from a song about, you know, what do you do if the mad and all that, and the senator, I mean, just totally speechless. And how can he, you know, how can he lash at Fred after that and just, yeah, Fred saved the day right there with PBS and all that. Good on him. And of course, if you know all that, all those details, and of course, it's out there on YouTube. You can easily find it. Just, that's amazing. Yeah, and also, yeah, because, like, because, yeah, another thing that was talked about is, like, yeah, a suicide attempt, because apparently Fred's wife mentions that he once tried to commit suicide as a child, which drove his passion to help other children. Man, if he had done that, who knows what the world would have been like if we did not have Fred as he grew up, and what he would do. Because, yeah. But anyways, yeah. Also, because, what else to mention? Well, yeah, I already mentioned about, oh yeah, because I talked about, say, death, because, yeah, because, like, the whole thing about the loss of, the thing of death and all that, because, well, you know, one point in the show, Fred pointed out that there was one fish in the fish tank that was dead, and Fred, attending to that dead fish, scooping it up, putting it in a napkin and all that, and doing a burial for that fish. And, you know, all these later things that would come in Fred's life, and even when his show kept going, like, oh yes, like, of course I have to acknowledge, say, when it came to everybody on television, like, kind of like poking fun at Fred, like parodies and all that of Fred, those doing impressions of him, like, well, say, Eddie Murphy, SCTV did something of, that had to do with Fred Rogers in a boxing arena, and just all these other things that would come over the years, or even say when Jim Carrey did a parody of Fred Rogers. You know all this, just... And Fred, because, you know, he seemed to take it very well. I mean, he found some of them amusing, the impressions of him, and, you know, viewed, maybe not all of them, but some of them as, some nice, like, what's the word, that compassion or something, respect, to Fred and all that. I think that would especially go for, say, with Eddie Murphy, Mr. Robbins. Because, yeah, I mean, as we all know, Eddie Murphy and Fred Rogers did cross paths, and, yeah, I mean, Fred, he found what Eddie Murphy was doing, an impression of him, amusing, as far as I can remember, and even when they played a clip of when Fred appeared on David Letterman's show, and when, yeah, he crossed paths and visited Eddie Murphy on the set of SNL. Also, like, the documentary doesn't mention this, but we would, of course, know this, too. That one time when Burger King did a commercial that was a parody of Fred Rogers, where, yeah, Fred Rogers, a parody version of Fred Rogers, was promoting for burgers and such. I mean, overall, Fred was not too fond of it, but he gave compliment on the actor who did a parody of him, doing a spot-on impression of him, which he did, yeah. He did a good spot-on impression of Fred. And also, like, the documentary talking about, like, the later television content made for children and all that, and, you know, because everything, like, those shows, like, back in the 80s and 90s, even when they, like, most prominently play a clip of Ren and Stimpy, very loud and obnoxious, and Fred at one point, another clip they play of his show, where if something's loud and all that, and they're screaming and kids don't like it or anything, then you just turn off the television, you know. You turn the dial or press the button on the remote, and just problem solved. Yeah. Also, yeah, the whole thing about time. Fred, who had a thing for a minute, because, yeah, and even when, like, in the show, explaining, like, how long is a minute, and that was a big thing that Fred did, just, yeah, liking peace and quiet, and on account of 1 minute. Yeah, because, you know, by waiting 1 minute to watch the clock and... just like that, you know, just like complete silence. That wasn't, yeah, I mean, that wasn't really up to a minute, but you get my point, and as I was demonstrating. But, yeah, sometimes we would need that. Right? And with what Fred specifically said. Yep. Okay, and anything else to bring up? Because, yeah. Well, I mean, just, yeah, like, here's another thing. The whole thing of Fred saying to everyone, to us, the viewers, that you are special. Well, I mean, yeah, because, like, apparently in the later years, and even up, like, say, to the early 2000s, well, once again, people were lashing at Fred Rogers, calling him an evil man. Even, like, when they played a clip from Fox and Friends, them criticizing Fred Rogers because, you know, those that when Fred's telling you that you are special, but when you get to an older age, you don't feel special. Fred lied to us. No, that's bullcrap. Because no, even when, yeah, eventually, like, when Fred, he would make a college speech back in 2002. I'm sure you're aware of this, and it too being out there on YouTube, that footage of him making a speech at that college. He would address and establish the meaning, what he meant about you are special. Yeah. He meant that each person is unique and valuable simply because they exist. That's why. That explains, and that people didn't get at first. But yeah, and it was a message of unconditional love and acceptance, emphasizing that no one else is exactly like them and that their individuality, yeah, is a gift. And he wanted children to understand their inherent worth to be comfortable being themselves, rather than trying to be someone else. You don't have to be someone else to have that person to like/love you. Not at all. Just, that is unnecessary. Be you. And even when Fred had said this most prominently, that he likes us just the way you are. So there you go. Simple as that. Yeah. Yeah, and also because, yeah, I had a feeling that probably this was going to be shown in the documentary too, where, you know, the very last day of filming the final episode, of Mr. Rogers. Yep. Even some of those, like, getting a bit emotional, and, you know, even, like, someone else whom is also in the documentary, you know, like, probably, like, in the next 2 weeks or something, he's gonna forget that person, all that. Which, by the way, yeah, because Nick Tallo, yeah, I think I'm saying his last name right, whom was the floor manager of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, when we cut to him and the stories and fun facts that he shares about, and, you know, even when he shares this, that, you know, the crew of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, they poked fun at Fred, you know, harmlessly, of course. And, like, I've seen this blooper, and I'm sure you have too, where someone swapped Fred's shoes with someone else's, and, you know, it took Fred a few seconds to realize, and he started laughing. Then the crew off camera, they start laughing because they knew they got him. And, yeah, I mean, Fred found that joke amusing, that prank and such. It was a harmless, simple prank. And, you know, whose are these? They're Jimmy's. Yeah, it's definitely fun when seeing bloopers / outtakes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Also, because other jokes and stuff they did, and especially with using pictures, cameras and such, flash cameras, and Fred would sometimes bring in a camera and take pictures of the children and such on set, and Nick Tallo, like, he and some others, like, taking funny pictures, nothing really too inappropriate. Well, I mean, that kind of is with the exception. I mean, come on, even, like, this is technically harmless. Nick Tallo, like, flashing his butt, you know, being, you know, taking a picture and such. And, yeah, like, taking Fred's camera and he, like, you know, exposing his butt cheeks and, yeah, taking his pants down. And, after they did that, and Fred, whom then looked at, obviously, he then looked at the photos on his camera, well, he didn't say anything. And then time went by a little later, and up to Christmas, Fred had a Christmas gift for Nick, and it was a picture of his butt. And apparently, he was wearing a King Friday mask or something. Yeah, but that was quite amusing. See, even Fred Rogers having a good sense of humor. Mm-hmm. But anyways, yeah, so there's that. And yeah, to name some of the other cast members that are part of this documentary, because, like, yeah, those that were close friends and such, because, yeah, George Worth and Ralph Ellison, you know, he's an author and member of the Carnegie Commission. Yeah, he appears in the archive footage. There's also David Bianculli, if I even got his last name right. He's a television critic. Yeah, and John O. Pastor, the senator, yeah, that was touched by what Fred said, yeah, appearing in the archive footage. Yo-Yo Ma, yep, Yo-Yo Ma being mentioned and being in this documentary. And a journalist, Susan Stamberg, showing up too. And yeah, she most prominently was talking about, say, when the subjects were brought up, divorce and the Challenger, all that. And Lauren Hollander, who's a concert pianist, appears in the archive footage. And there was also, yeah, this is him. Yeah, Yo-Yo Ma, because, like, the fiddler player and all that, because, yeah, because the stories that he shares, you know, with meeting Fred, and, you know, when he appeared in an episode and playing his, you know, like, fiddle instruments and all that. And to go ahead and talk about this, and yeah, this involving Yo-Yo Ma, because, well, the later years of Fred, and up to the early 2000s, well, Fred was, he had been sick for a while. He had stomach issues and such. He refused to go to the doctor because of that. And even when at one point he was on the phone with Yo-Yo Ma, saying to Yo-Yo Ma that he was sick and all that. And Yo-Yo Ma, he played his fiddle instruments, you know, like playing it for Fred on the phone. That was very nice of him, very touching. Also, yeah, like another thing that's brought up is, yeah, because another biggie that happened in America history, and Fred being there to, and how he did it, how he addressed it and all that, when 9/11 happened. Yeah, because this hit Fred very hard. And when he was feeling that, yeah, because the evilness and the darkness just consuming the world. And, well, obviously Fred knew this, that because of what happened on 9/11, the world changed, for sure. And he wasn't really sure at first on doing this and what to do when being approached to make a speech and all that, a message to the television viewers. But you know what? He managed to pull through. The delivery that he gives us, which of course you can find on YouTube, and parts of it being in the documentary. Well put, because it's Fred Rogers. Yeah. Also, because, even after Fred sadly passed away, we see a bit of archive footage of his funeral. Even the pianist, him, because played some nice music, even like playing, a few bits on the keyboard that sounds exactly like the trolley. Oh, yeah, that was nice. And even to this day, at the time of this documentary, how the world needs Fred Rogers. We need Fred Rogers, at times like these. And, and that question of what would Fred Rogers do? The saying, what would Fred Rogers do? Yeah. And also, another, big prominent person that appears in this documentary, the co-director of Fred Rogers Center, Junlee Lee, if I got his full name right. And to mention some of the others, a colleague / friend of Fred's, Bill Eisler. There was also Joe Negri, who appears in the documentary too, whom on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, he was Handyman Negri. And there was also Hedda Sharapin, who was a child development advisor, and Betty Siemens, Mrs. McFeely, and biographer Max King. Mm-hmm. And also journalist, and whom being a friend of Fred's, Tom Junod. Yep, because most prominently when talking about the whole thing of gay people and such, and also the producer of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Margaret Whitmire. Mm-hmm. So, just to name the other people that are part of this documentary, and also, okay, all right. I think that's about everyone. Even those that appear through archive footage, even the Clintons, they appear, Michael Keaton, Lyndon B. Johnson, Coco. Yeah, Coco only appears through archive footage. Those that were a part of the Challenger, and, and Johnny Carson. Because that's, I almost forgot, because Johnny Carson doing a parody of Fred Rogers, and the thing of hookers. God. Seriously? Because even Johnny Carson, what was Johnny Carson thinking? No hard feelings towards Johnny Carson. We love Johnny Carson. He was one of the top kings of talk show, but, anyways. Alright, but just, because we're up to the end of the documentary, and with all that I have left to say, because, again, as I brought up, the whole thing about what would Fred Rogers do, but also, they bring this up, even the director of the Fred Rogers Center, Fred Rogers asking you, whom you should think of, for a minute, someone that was important in your life. They may be here, they may be far away, or up in heaven, all that Fred said, if you know what it was that he said, if you've heard about it. And each of the people that appear in this documentary, they take a moment to think about those that meant so much to them, the important people in their life. And even those that are off camera, they have a few words to say and so on. And then one of the last things we see is Fred's two sons, then his wife, and she ends off with the documentary saying, "Thank you." Just, amazing. And and while the end credits roll, we do get a little bit of archive footage, as I brought up earlier, of that one award show where Jeff showed up and surprised Fred. Yep, that. I think that's all I've got to say. The best I can do talking about this documentary, even Fred would know that, I didn't need to do my hardest to all that I could say. Just, All right. But so, man, this documentary, all about Fred Rogers, Won't You Be My Neighbor? It is, without a doubt, an excellent documentary, and in my opinion, a true definitive documentary all about Mr. Rogers himself. Everything this documentary has to offer from beginning to end, the facts, the key moments that came through Fred's life when he was on television, the pivotal parts that he went through, the ups and downs, those that appear in this documentary, and some stuff that we didn't know about at first about Fred, but until now, thanks to this documentary. Those of us that grew up with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, we knew about the man himself, how he touched everyone's lives, even as of now, with new generations. No doubt about it. Yeah. And as long as we keep the memory of Fred Rogers alive, and to anybody would show the next generation, have them be aware of this man. Yeah. And again, the ups and downs, the criticisms and the tragedies that happened, the topics that are talked about and that, Fred handled throughout the show and in his life. He did it so well, done. Just, what more do I really have to say? This documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor, it's excellent, worth watching, all of the above, And I'm giving Won't You Be My Neighbor, well, is it obvious? 10 out of 10 stars. Yes, 10 out of 10 stars for Won't You Be My Neighbor. And what about you guys? What did you think of Won't You Be My Neighbor itself? The amazing and, in my opinion, definitive documentary all about Fred Rogers himself. What are your fondest memories of Fred Rogers, his shows, and, any certain topics and how they affected you and they meant something to you? The kind words and those impertinent words that he said directly to us who watched him on television. Moments and topics you didn't know about, and that especially have to do with Fred. You didn't know at first, but thanks to this documentary, you now know. Did you, because there of course are some amusing and funny moments, but especially there's a lot of tear-jerking moments, and I have no doubt for any of you, you got very emotional from this documentary. But for me personally, no, I didn't. I didn't shed a tear, but I definitely could feel. Of course we can. Of course, it never fails. We can feel the impact and power that comes from documentaries like these, like this one specifically. Oh yeah. Favorite moments that come from this documentary, and And if any of you, because if you got to see this around the time when it first came out, and it was obviously it was shown in some theaters. If you got to see it on the big screen, or when you saw it later on digital, etc., do you think it's a well-put documentary? One of your top favorite documentaries? And anything that has to do with Fred Rogers himself? And also if you've visited the location and so on of where he grew up in Pennsylvania, and if you visited the Fred Rogers Center, you've seen the statue of Fred Rogers, everything about Fred Rogers. If you've seen reruns of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and just need I go on? But overall, what do you think of Won't You Be My Neighbor itself, with what all I've had to say, my review, and what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like as always. And so guys, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of the amazing definitive documentary all about Fred Rogers himself. Won't You Be My Neighbor? Could you be mine? More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward. And I will see you guys in the next video / review. Rest in peace, Fred Rogers. Take care. You are who you are. You're special the way you are. And so on. Peace out.